It started with a piece of paper and a sentence that felt like a verdict. Violation exterior. Illumination standards, $200 to $500 fine. I stared at it on my porch like it was a practical joke, then looked up at the little porch sconce I'd installed because I kept nearly breaking my ankle on the third step, and the light felt suddenly criminal. My name is Ethan Parker. I live at 42 Willow Creek, and apparently in this neighborhood the color temperature of your porch bulb is a moral choice. Carolyn Bennett, our HOA president, slid that beige card under my door like a declaration of war, and 3 days later I had a 200-pound airport beacon sitting on my driveway. If you want to skip to the end, it did not end with fireworks and high fives. It ended with a stained ballot, a rescinded fine, and a lot of people pretending they didn't take sides. But let me tell you exactly how it got there. I bought my house because it made sense. Good schools, quick commute, a yard that didn't need a landscaper every week. Willow Creek is one of those neighborhoods where everything is trimmed to the millimeter, and every mailbox has a board-approved color. It's quiet in a curated way, and if you're into perfectly neutral paint, it's heaven. I'm not obsessive about rules. I like my lawn. I pay my dues, but I also like not tripping over the steps. One evening, I swapped a warm white bulb for a brighter LED because the step is just a tick-off and the package deliveries at night are a gamble. Practical, safe, unimaginative choice. A day later, Carolyn in her golf cart, painted to match the neighborhood trim, of course, stopped in front of my house at 9 p.m. Clipboard, out expression like she'd caught a sinner. "Ethan," she said, and I braced for an HOA sermon. "That light is aggressive." She said the word like it described a personality disorder, not a color temperature. It's daylight. It's confusing the hydrangeas next door. It's clinical. She quoted Article 4.2b about exterior illumination, mentioned 2700K, like it was scripture, and left me with a notice that made my stomach drop, to $500 assessed $50 a day thereafter. The number felt disproportionate, petty, even punitive. And it landed with that particular burn you get when somebody uses procedure to humiliate you. I called Sam my oldest friend because with Sam you get blunt, useful advice. Buy the $5 bulb swap. It move on. He did not understand my face. "It's $5, he said. "They're not worth your time." He was right. For an hour, I almost did what Sam said. I pictured the comforting dullness of a warm bulb and the end of the drama. But every time I thought about swallowing it, I saw that beige card the way Carolyn had said aggressive, like it was an insult, the way she patrolled the neighborhood like a tiny, righteous sheriff. It wasn't about the light anymore. It was about whose yard it was and who got to say how it looked. So I did what people do when petty rules meet stubbornness. I read the rules. I downloaded the HOA CCNRs, and after 20 pages of micromanagement about mailboxes and lawn ornaments, I found the part about lighting all exterior illumination fixtures of a standard residential nature must utilize bulbs not to exceed 2700K. The emphasis was mine, standard residential nature. Suddenly, the document looked less like an absolute and more like a category. If standard residential was the qualifier, what was non-standard? The book was silent. You can justify small tyrannies when the rules are crisp. You can't when the rules are fuzzy. The fog in my head lifted in a weird, dangerous way. If Carolyn wanted a 2700K bulb in a standard fixture, she didn't write about non-standard equipment. That gap, a lawyer would call it ambiguity. I called it air. And then, in the coldest stitch of midnight between anger and caffeine, I found the FAA advisory and a surplus auction listing a decommissioned L-81A rotating airport beacon military grade designed for 24/7 operation weatherproof and, crucially, not a standard residential fixture. It was federal, it was industrial, it was gloriously non-residential. It was also objectively a lunatic response to a $2,500 fine for a 60-watt equivalent bulb. The sane thing was to buy a 2700K bulb. The childish, delicious thing was to buy the beacon. I bought the beacon. I also called Sal Russo, a man who on paper should not have returned my call because Sal does the weird stuff. He answered on the second ring like he'd been waiting for a project that would make his eyebrows sing. "You sure?" he asked. Sure enough, I said. He didn't ask what for or why. He asked logistics safety and whether I wanted a kill switch in the garage. Small things mattered. We crated it. It arrived on a flatbed that clogged Maple Drive and made the neighborhood gawk, and for the first time in my adult life I felt the exact same cold thrill you get when you take a stupid risk and the universe goes quiet to watch. The installation was ugly and legal and loud. Sal poured concrete, set a 12-foot galvanized pole, ran 240 volts, bolted the beacon, and installed a giant red mushroom stop switch with sloppy handwriting on a label that read, "Patriot, Light Emergency, Stop." Carolyn came in her robe the day we were trenching curls in her hair phone in hand. "What is that?" she shrieked like someone had invented a new sin. "It's my fixture," I said, wearing a hard hat Sal handed me like a crown. "You told me my light wasn't welcoming," I said. "I'm complying." She hovered between outrage and confusion. People who wield small power are very bad at being mocked by literal compliance. At dusk, we flipped the switch. The beacon woke with a mechanical groan, and the beam cut through the evening like a blade white, then emerald rotating 6 times a minute, painting our cul-de-sac in alternating industrial colors. The effect was instantaneous. Garage doors misbehaved. Mrs. Peterson's cat skittered Tim's TV, looked like it was broadcasting from a UFO. Carolyn stood on her lawn in her fuzzy slippers, phone in hand, fingers stabbing the screen. "Turn it off," she screamed. I cupped my ear and called back, "I can't hear you over how compliant I am. The police came because HOA Drama always needs a blue light cameo. Officer Miller was older, the kind of cop who's seen folks angry at strangely legal things. He saw the beacon read our installation paperwork, squinted at me, and said what I half expected and half hoped. "It's on your property. It's not red or blue. It's not impersonating an emergency vehicle. This is a civil matter." He told Carolyn to take it up with the HOA. Carolyn's face went through a series of colors that looked a lot like shame rearranging itself. The HOA called an emergency meeting, which is what happens when a small government panics. The clubhouse was packed. It felt less like a neighborhood meeting and more like a very local tribunal. Carolyn presented her case, Nuisance Safety Hazard Property Values Hydrangeas. She spoke about harmony and communal aesthetic as if they were physical infrastructure. The room leaned in. I stood with a 3-ring binder. I do not love public speaking, but I love being prepared. I handed out copies the original notice she'd given me. Article 4.2b, the FAA Advisory Circular, Sal's licensed invoice, the surplus auction receipt. My voice was steadier than I felt. Article 4 applies to standard residential fixtures, I told them. This is not one. I explained federal compliance. I explained that an injunction requires a defined nuisance, something without redeeming purpose, and that my beacon had a purpose, however absurd navigational aid for small aircraft decommissioned but intact registered on surplus records. Then Jason Patterson. Mr. Henderson's son, corporate lawyer, low-key, who'd once been fined for a basketball hoop, stood up and said, "They don't have the language to cover this. You can't retroactively expand rules to capture what you missed." The room shifted. Laughter, a few relieved claps, the kind that sound like permission to stop pretending. The board voted. They rescinded the $1,000 fine they'd slapped on me, and the motion to remove the beacon failed because it would have required a properly defined violation. They announced a bylaw review language would be tightened to ban non-residential lighting of stadium grade, and Carolyn's authority had clearly been dented. She was furious and small, and I felt in the moment she said she would make them pay the old cardboard cowardice of someone who loved imposing order more than being judged by it. I did not dance. I did not throw a party. I felt tired in that particular bone-deep way you do after a fight that was bigger than it needed to be. I had won on the technicality of words and on the performance of compliance, and that felt both clever and exhausting. I had Sal come back and set a timer. The beacon now runs from 8 to 10 p.m. only, and he swapped the motor for a quieter one. I installed the mushroom switch in plain view. I know the irony. I'd escalated from a $2,500 fine about a light bulb to what looked like a beacon of defiance, but I also knew something else. Rules are only as moral as the people who enforce them. Carolyn lost authority because she'd weaponized ambiguity. The neighborhood woke up to the fact that harmony can be curated, but it can also be enforced, and sometimes enforcement looks a lot like control. I sit on my porch some nights now, the beacon quiet until 8, and the light sweeps over the cul-de-sac in a deliberate, ridiculous arc. People still whisper. People still roll their eyes. I'm not proud of the escalation, and I'm not sorry I pushed back. The lesson is small and sharp. If rules are going to run your life, read them carefully, and if they're unjust, sometimes compliance can be the bluntest form of rebellion.